Welcome back to my channel. My name is Beth, and this is my favorite reads of 2023 so far. I still have a couple weeks in December and some very promising books up there on my TBR shelf. There are a couple books that one I couldn't get to, one I can't find it, and I don't remember if I ever bought a physical copy of it or if I just read it on Kindle. And all 5-star books. I had a wonderful reading year this year. I've read a lot of great books, and it was hard to narrow them down to just these. If you've been to my channel, you know that I absolutely adore Agatha Christie. I didn't put any of her books on here, and that was hard. So I'm going to start with one that I finished around the 1st of February, and I'll put it up here. It's House of Sky and Breath. This is one that I couldn't get to. It's behind some stuff. This is the second in the Crescent City series by Sarah J. Maas. It was my intention to put this on my TBR for the beginning of the year, but since I've already filmed that TBR and it is not on my TBR, unless I just fly through the books and can get it in, it's not on there. And I'm not going to give synopsis of these books. I'm just going to go through them. I just love the characters in this series, and I put it off for a long time. So I've only had to wait a year for the new book. It's coming out at the end of January, so I'm very pleased with that and hope I can read that around the same time. So February. The next one that I read in March was The Souls of Lost Lake by Jamie Jo Wright. I've read several of her since. This was the first one I read. I absolutely adore her writing. I just fell in love with her books, and I try to read one every other month, and eventually I'm going to run out of them. So yeah. I have another one up there to read next year, but it didn't get on the list for January. So the next one, I'm making sure that I did not put in a Kindle book. The next one I read was Babel, and I started tabbing. This was the first R.F. Kuang book I read, and I absolutely love this book too. And I wasn't much for dark academia. I can't even talk. I wasn't much for dark academia. Anyway, I really enjoyed this book, and it will definitely be a reread and more annotation in it, and I can't wait to get more books by her and read them. This was just amazing. So I loved it, and when people ask me about this book, like when I see people say that they're scared of this book, I tell them not to be. It's a wonderful book. It is amazing. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. Oops. All right, the next one was a second in a series. Again, it was Echo in the Darkness by Francine Rivers, and this was, I had to have a friend pick, and my friend Chris picked, and it was amazing, and I was so glad she made me read it because it answered all of my questions from the first book. I have the third book that matches my set because I wouldn't buy it until I could find it to match my set, and I'm excited to read that this coming year. I'm not telling you anything about these books, am I? Okay. Oh, and I finished that one at the end of March. All right. The next one, I read a book called by Camilla Stein. I can't even remember the name of it. I don't know where it's at either. Oh, The Lost Village is the name of it. And I was determined to find more of her books. And so I did. I found The Resting Place. And this book was amazing too. And it's about a woman who, let me make sure, yes, she has facial blindness. So she sees a person murder her grandmother. I believe it's her grandmother. Yes, she comes face to face with this person, but she cannot recognize them in a police lineup if they were to put them, But she knows her life is on the line because that person doesn't necessarily know that she can recognize it. So, anyway, I really enjoyed this book, and I enjoyed The Lost Village so much. It was one of my favorites as well. But the next one was another favorite author, Simone St. James, The Haunting of Maddie Clare. And this is about a ghost who haunts a place, and she doesn't like men. And this Alistair Gillis is summoned to investigate, but he has to take a woman in there with him. So he hires Sarah Piper because his assistant is not with him at the time. Well, then his assistant comes in, and so it's the three of them. And I mean, this was so good. It was so good, and I loved it. All right, and I read a Dean Koontz book, The Big Dark Sky, and this one was really good, and I enjoyed it so much. And I read a lot of books in June, okay? Forgive me, I can't remember all of them. And that was 6 months ago. All right, the next one, this won't be a surprise. He's on my list every year. The Only One Left by Riley Sager. He's another favorite author. I absolutely love his books. I don't care what anybody else says. I love every one of his books. This is about I would say a nursing care, like a nursing assistant, like a care aide assistant. She has to take care of this lady who cannot do for herself, and she can't talk, but she can type. And so this woman has supposedly murdered everybody in her family, but she's 90 now. I believe she's 90. Anyway, she's old, and she can't take care of herself. Anyway, so she goes in to help, and it is so good. And they live in this house on this cliff. He did a good job. It's Fourth Wing. I've read this twice this year. Both times I loved it. There's just something about the little characters in here, and I just love the dragons. This is about Violet. She has studied all her life to go through the scribe quadrant, and when she is I think it's like 6 months or maybe a year before she's to go, her mother tells her she's going to go into the writer's quadrant, and so she only has that amount of time to be training, when most writers prepare their whole life for it. And she's a tiny thing, and she refuses to cut her hair. And then there's it's an enemies to lovers. This writer is his third year, and his name is Zayden, and her mom gave the order to have his dad killed, but supposedly his dad killed her brother. And so he's going to be out to get her. And she doesn't realize that he's in there until her sister tells her just before she goes up there. So she has to defy all odds because the deck is stacked against her. So it's amazing. I loved it. Would have been loving the Iron Flame probably if I had not spoiled myself. But I'm determined to read it in January. So this next one is the one I could not find, so I'm not sure if I read it on Kindle and just didn't remember reading it on Kindle. But it's Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. She writes STEM romances, and she's just recently released a young adult that I started but haven't finished it. And this is by far my favorite. Love Theoretically is by far my favorite that she has put out. It's about a girl who is... she dates people. She's trying to pay off like student loans, and she doesn't make enough in what she's doing. And so this one date that she has, she's being paid to be his girlfriend, pretend girlfriend. Well, his brother also happens to interview her like a few days later or a week later, and so yeah, it kind of causes a mess. So the next one I read, we're up to August by the way, so we're over half done, was Fairy Tale. I buddy read this with my sister, and this was a fantasy by Stephen King, and this was great. So Charlie is a high school student who has made a promise to God that if he helped his dad get off alcohol and helped him, become not alcoholic, that he would return the favor. And so he helps Mr. Bowditch, and so that starts their friendship. But Radar has his heart. That's Mr. Bowditch's dog. And so when Mr. Bowditch dies, he takes care of Radar, and then they must do something and go somewhere to help Radar. Okay. June, July, and August, I read a lot of books because those are summer months. The Maidens. I put this off so long, by Alex Michaelides. This is about a professor who has a following of girls called the Maidens, and this woman thinks he is a murderer. She recently lost her I guess husband. Anyway, she's grieving, and her niece calls her because her best friend has been found murdered. And so the lady comes to investigate, and she used to be a student there, and so she thinks the professor is the one killing the girls. Incredible read. Alright. Ouch. The end of August, I read Catherine Center's Hello Stranger. I had already read The Bodyguard and decided I wanted another Catherine Center. So I read Hello Stranger, and this is about a girl who gets in an accident and she becomes face blind. She has face blindness from the accident and ends up in love with two people. And she's an artist, and it's just really, really, really cute and really sweet. Alright, and Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. This is about Brianna Ortiz. Her divorce is about to be finalized, and her brother needs a kidney. I think it's... Yes. And his time's almost out, and this new doctor moves in, and he's already ran his where he was before the emergency room. I guess it's an emergency room. I don't know. Anyway, um, she thinks he's going to steal her job, the job she wants, but he doesn't seem to do anything right. So he writes her a letter because she seems set on hating him, and everybody else does too. So it's so sweet. The next one was in October. So see, we skipped September. These Violent Delights. This one has been on my shelf for a while as well. This is a Romeo and Juliet retelling, and this is a series. This is by Chloe Gong. This is the first one I've read of Chloe Gong. And this is set in 1920s Shanghai. And I guess I'm just going to, there is a blood feud between two gangs, and there is a monster as well involved, and they must band together and work together. So the next one was the end of October, The Sisters of Seaview. This is a story about some sisters and their mother, and their father has recently died and left them impoverished, and so they decide to turn their house into a bed and breakfast or a seaside resort, whichever one you want to call it. But then things start happening. One of them decides to take a job reading to people, and she thinks it's going to be like elderly people, but she ends up next door reading to this young general, or anyway, young officer. It just says young officer who's in his 30s, and so she's the one that is scarred, so she wears a veil to cover her face. Oh, this one I don't have. So the only one that I put on here more than once, the only author was Jamie to Wright, The Curse of Misty Wayfair, and I really enjoyed this one. I told you I enjoy all of hers, and I just finished this one in November. Okay, so this one is in running with The Souls of Lost Lake. It would definitely be up for number one in my book with that one. So this one has Simeon Coyle in it, and from the very first moment I met him, I loved him. As a character. So Thea Reed grew up in an orphanage, and she was determined to find out who her parents were. So she travels after this couple takes her in. He was a post-mortem photographer, I think is what it was. And so that's what she does. And so then she goes, after he dies, she ends up in this town, and she takes this picture of this lady, and her last name is Coyle, and that's where she meets Simeon, and she ends up helping him. But in the present day timeline, Heidi receives a troubling letter from her mother, who's battling dementia. So she has to go home, but she doesn't know, anything about the letter. It was very open, like she didn't leave any details in the letter. She just says, you need to come home. I've got something I need to tell you. And so they don't want to tell her, and her sister just acts like, that there's nothing going on, and so she's very upset because they won't tell her what's really going on, or why she was called home. And so anyway, yeah, now I remember. Okay, so the next one, this was the first time I actually read this book, and I read it because of the readathon, the Little Women readathon, and it was Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Now it is one of my favorites. I don't think I need to tell you what it's about. I think you know. The next two are ones I've just finished. The Secret by Lee Child and Andrew Child. And this is about Jack Reacher. And this one is actually set back when he was still in the army. And he's on a mission. And then he is pulled into this secret task force type mission. And he has to find out who is killing these scientists and why. And then I just finished this one this morning. It was A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, and it was, I guess I finished it last night. So good. And I don't have to tell you what A Christmas Carol is about. I'm sure you've seen it on TV if you have not read the book. And I was crying, and I thought it was a reread, but I don't think I've ever read it now that I've read it. But anyway, I was crying, and it was so good. So there you have it. Those are my favorite books of 2023 so far this year, and I hope next year is as blessed with favorite books as this year was. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button, and I will see you in the next one.